Hey all, it's Terry with Something Spooky. We are talking again about The Invisible Man 2020. And in this video in particular, I'm going to be talking about how I think The Invisible Man 2020 is better than the original Invisible Man movie from 1933, which I love, so no disrespect to that movie. But I just want to say quickly that I have a bunch of other Invisible Man videos up this weekend. I have an Invisible Man review. I have a video talking about how I think The Invisible Man 2020 is the best Universal monster movie since The Wolfman 1941. And some more. So check out Something Spooky for all of that for a more in-depth look at the movie. But in this one, I'm going to be speaking very specifically to it in comparison to the original Invisible Man. So I want to say again, I love The Invisible Man. It's one of my favorite movies, one of my favorite horror Universal monster movies, the original that is. It's great, it's timeless. It is kind of the embodiment of a lot of traits of what people think of with classic movie monsters. So I don't say this, to be condescending to that movie at all. I just think my central premise is that this Invisible Man, the 2020 Invisible Man, realizes the potential of the original concept of the character in the book and that original movie in a way that just couldn't have been done before, and makes the character relevant in a way that is, it just feels more true to our times than maybe it did even back then. Because I never really totally got the Invisible Man. Like, I liked him, I thought he was a cool monster, like he looked good, but his message, his meaning, I know it's like the mad scientist thing, but maybe it's just because by the time I had seen that, the movie was 50 years old and there had just been so many mad scientist angles that this one in particular of him just like taking the potion and kind of losing it just didn't really click with me in the way that even, Frankenstein is so clearly, about like the folly of man and like the arrogance of man and playing God. Like that I still got. And, the Wolfman is about these like primal urges that you can't, resist and the dark nature of man. And that I got. But the Invisible Man just felt kind of like out of time, kind of just like, well, maybe this was scary to somebody at some point, or it meant something at one point that I don't really get now. But it always just kind of felt like this relic. So it's hard to say what people actually thought of it at the time, but for a long time, I think it's fair to say the Invisible Man has been a second tier monster. You got your Frankenstein, Dracula, creature, mummy, Wolfman, and like maybe if they do a wave 2 of figures or whatever, you'll get an Invisible Man. But it has not felt like as pressing of a tale for our time for a long time. I think it's fair to say. We've seen that in the way that the Invisible Man has been represented in pop culture. He's been pretty dormant, for a long time. There's, of course, lots of appearances. I think it might be public domain. It's so ubiquitous now that it'll just show up in something without any real note or reference. I can't remember if it was in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, but that's the kind of thing that, it just like is randomly everywhere, but it's also kind of nowhere. It hasn't been curated and stewarded by Universal Monsters the same way some of its other properties have. So it's been a long time since we've really seen a true, crack at the Invisible Man story. And Lee Wannell, the director of the Invisible Man 2020, found a way to do it, and also wrote the movie. Did an amazing job with both the writing and the direction. I love this movie. If I'm doing all these videos on it, like I said, you should check out the review for my full thoughts. But it's just amazing to me that it's one of these things where the character just kind of perfectly suddenly fits our time. And it just happens in this way that is almost, it's impossible to explain or plan for. It's just kind of the way art happens sometimes. I think the Invisible Man right now as a monster is the most kind of believable and relatable that it's ever been. And that's both in terms of like its concept and the backstory of the character in the movie and like how it's achieved and stuff, but also like the messages and meanings that it carries now and the ties you can make to it in other elements of our lives and pop culture. It just suddenly feels like a more relevant monster. And I think maybe one comparison you can make to that is Iron Man, who for a long time was, kind of the secondary at best superhero, and this was kind of on the fringes for a lot of people. Maybe saw him but didn't really know him. And then of course with the Iron Man movie, Robert Downey Jr. and the Avengers films and the MCU is now like one of the biggest pop characters ever of all time, and probably always will be. And it just happened at that time where the character suddenly had a new relation in life, to the way we all live our lives now and the way that we see the world, and it just suddenly clicked. And I feel like that is happening a little bit with the Invisible Man, because a lot of the message and meaning of the movie has to do with social media and online harassment. It's not super like heavy-handed or clear about that in the movie. It's more of a feeling and you kind of interpret it. There are a few examples where there's like emails and things like that. But overall, it's more just this idea that the filmmakers speak to in like the making of, that, you know, you can anonymously harass anybody now and cause people great pain and inflict, you know, damage on them kind of in plain sight, you know, while nobody sees it. And that was the message that the filmmakers were going for, was this idea of online bullying and harassment. And I think that's part of what makes the character suddenly so relevant. And then the other aspect that the filmmakers had not planned on, and I have a whole video on you can check out, is the pandemic, the COVID-19 virus. I think there are parallels to be made there for the Invisible Man, where suddenly the idea of this invisible threat carries more weight than maybe it did, you know, even a few years ago. So check out those videos for more on those thoughts. But the idea basically is that the Invisible Man now kind of has a life and meaning that I don't think he ever has, like, at least not for a very long time. And I'm not sure what the feelings were exactly when those books and movies were first made, but I think it may be an instance of where this character has kind of suddenly found a meaning that maybe it just didn't have before. It's almost like it was waiting for it. So I won't speak too much about the movies in comparison to each other, because it's hard to compare a movie from 2020 to a movie from 1933. But I will just say, you know, a lot of it comes down to technical limitations. And again, I love the first Invisible Man, and the design is iconic with like the wrapping, the bandages, and the glasses. I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. It's amazing. But, you know, it is what it is, and it's almost 100 years old now. And like now we have an actual Invisible Man that they are able to, you know, portray in a more effective. There was some of that in the original film too, where they did tricks to make him look invisible. But, you know, what they're able to do now with technology, where there's like whole fight scenes with invisible specters and stuff like that, and effects of rain, you know, pouring down it, and all of these kind of small touches that just weren't possible, you know, and like, it just looks good now. It looks like believable in a way that it never could have before. So that's another way that the character just feels kind of more alive now than ever. So again, I love the original Invisible Man. I'm not trying to say anything against that movie, but I just think that the Invisible Man 2020 has realized the character, the monster's full potential. So let me know if you agree or what you think. If you disagree, like this video and share it if you enjoyed it. And remember to follow Something Spooky and check out the rest of the Invisible Man content. Thanks.